Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second webinar in this series, Building Strong Communities for Business Success, Pathways to Prosperity. This is a program that we started in the aims of highlighting the synergistic benefits of businesses stepping up, taking care of their employees, and going beyond their organizational boundaries to addressing critical societal issues that affect the workforce. We are lucky to have very good examples today, and we have the speakers from the Good Jobs Institute explaining to us the Good Jobs strategy. Amanda Silver is a director at the Good Jobs Institute, a nonprofit based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, with the mission to help companies thrive by creating good jobs. Amanda leads the Good Jobs Institute work with food and small businesses, supporting clients in their efforts to improve performance and reduce turnover through different operational and people investment choices. We also have the business example of someone who's been through the Good Job strategy and applied it. Dewey Hasbrook and his wife, Emily, have lived in Orono, Maine, where Dewey grew up. For the past 12 years, they've lived there, and they have two children, a son, Leo, and a daughter. Stuart Ten and own 3 restaurants. Moe's Original Barbecue in Bangor has been there for 11 years and in South Portland for 9 years. And Woodman's Bar and Grill in Orono, Maine for 2 weeks when he submitted this bio. So he has a brand new venture in Orono. Dewey is very involved in his community and is head coach for his son's youth hockey team. He graduated from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, received an MBA from Vanderbilt University. Dewey had a midlife career change crisis when he was 42 years old and left the world of medical sales to embark on this journey of restaurant ownership. And he has, as I mentioned, implemented the Good Jobs strategy. And I will hand it over now to Amanda to present her slides.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction, Zena, and great to meet all of you. As Zena mentioned, my name is Amanda. I'm a director at the Good Jobs Institute. We are a straight shot down 93 based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, not too far from New Hampshire. And our mission is to help companies thrive by creating good jobs. And we're super excited to be meeting with this group, meeting with groups that really care about community, about sustainability, about social responsibility, because so much of that involves, taking care of your people and creating great jobs where they can thrive in that community. But you're still operating a business. So we're going to be talking a lot about why it's important to be investing in your people, but also, why it matters to the business. What is the business case for good jobs? What are some of the consequences of low people investments and how that impacts your customers and performance? And then we're going to talk about how some companies operate differently. We're going to introduce the Good Job Strategy framework, the Good Job Strategy system, which is a mix of operational choices and people investment that really enable companies to invest a lot more in their people and deliver great customer satisfaction and great financial performance all at the same time. And after that, we'll be hearing from Dewey about his journey at Moe's and at Woodman's, and then there'll be some time for Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout the beginning of this presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'd love to discuss them at the end. So I'm going to start here because I know a lot of you have been on a lot of the other webinars in the series talking about what it means to provide a good job, the importance of financial stability, financial wellness. And I think that really complements how we look at what is a good job. So this is our employee hierarchy of needs, based loosely on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which you might be familiar if you studied psychology. So at the top, we have the higher needs. These are the things that drive really great job satisfaction. I'm sure you all feel in your own jobs, in your own day-to-day life, just how important these things are. Things like meaningfulness, personal growth, belonging, having coworkers that you respect you and that you care about you, sense of achievement, being recognized, All this is incredibly important to be able to be satisfied in your job. But often a lot of companies struggle here at the bottom of the pyramid, the foundation. And these are what we call the basic needs. So offering adequate pay and benefits. The earlier webinars have talked about, the importance of a living wage, which in New Hampshire is between about $17 an hour to $19 an hour, depending on family size. So incredibly important to have pay that allows you to take care of yourself, take care of your family. And pay is not just a function of your hourly wage, but it's also a function of, are you getting enough hours? Do you have a schedule that's stable, that's predictable? Are your hours all over the place? Can you arrange childcare? Can you take care of your own family and needs and sleep? And at the same time, do you have opportunities to grow? Do you have opportunities to advance within the company to increase your wages? And do you have that sense of safety and security? So all of these bottom basic needs, incredibly important. They don't necessarily deliver job satisfaction, but in their absence, high turnover is all but guaranteed. And high turnover, incredibly expensive for individuals, losing their job, losing their livelihood, and at the same time, incredibly expensive for companies. So this is what we call the vicious cycle. And it's a cycle that starts with low people investment and high turnover. So when you're in an environment where employees are leaving, they're not staying, you have understaffing, they're not well trained, all this drives more operational issues. So poor execution. You have managers who are filling in for employees instead of taking care of their tasks. You have employees who aren't great at their job, they're making more mistakes. Often it's their coworkers around them who are having to clean up those mistakes, so they're less productive. All of this can lead to lost sales because they aren't as comfortable with the products that you're selling. They're making more errors that makes them fail in front of the customer. So losing sales, higher costs, both in terms of overtime, in terms of waste, all these issues that come from poor execution. When you have lower sales and higher costs, that eats into your profits, and it becomes really hard to then justify investing more in your people, which is why this is such a vicious cycle. This cycle that's bad for customers, it's bad for your staff, and it's bad for investors and owners. And the assumption at the root of it all is that people are cost to be minimized. This is what we learn in business school. We learn on a P&L, people, if we're going to invest more in them, we calculate how much it would cost to raise wages, but we often don't calculate the costs of not having adequate people investment. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of these costs, starting with the direct costs of employee turnover. And these costs are just what it takes to hire, train, ramp up to baseline productivity, just the replacement costs for any time an employee leaves at your business. So here are just a few examples of companies that we've worked with. Convenience store chain, they had about 80% employee turnover. That was amounted to about $102 million a year. They're a large chain. They had several hundred stores. A call center for financial services. Their employees needed to be certified, and those were incredibly expensive certifications. So every time they were losing an employee, that meant that they had to go through the certification process again, which meant that even at 40% turnover, their cost of turnover was about 45% of payroll costs. That's just replacement. Restaurant chain, similar, 120% turnover. For them, it was about 9% of revenue. So pretty significant just in terms of replacement costs. But beyond just replacing employees, as we talked about with the vicious cycle, there's a lot of things that happen when you're in an environment where there is a lot of high employee turnover. So here we're looking at a convenience store chain on the left and a retailer on the right. But often when we work with large companies, they have a lot of different stores. We can do some fun analysis of looking at their stores that have lower turnover compared to their stores that have higher turnover. So you'll see here on the left with this convenience store, the stores that had lower turnover actually had much less waste, which is a measure in retailers shrink. That's pretty important for their bottom line, being able to reduce damages, reduce theft, all of these things that really matter when you're in a low margin industry. And this other retailer on the right, their stores with lower turnover also had much higher customer satisfaction. So those employees were more knowledgeable, they're more available, they could be there to talk with customers, they could actually get them that really good experience that if you're in that vicious cycle can be really difficult to achieve. So, these costs tend to build on each other, and that direct cost that was already pretty significant tends to be the smallest of these three costs. There's also the lost sales and higher costs from the poor execution. And on top of that, the competitive costs. If you are operating with high employee turnover, if you are especially an owner or a manager, you just know how difficult your job becomes. It can be really difficult to think about growth, to think about how do we improve on our current business if you're just trying to get through the day, to even have sort of the bandwidth to have, enforce high expectations, to hire the right people, to train them well. And you're really just focused on that constant cycle of hiring and training and hiring and training, it can be really difficult to improve the business and to just meet your own standards. So there are a lot of different costs of being in this vicious cycle, but there is another way, and vicious cycle is not inevitable. So back in 2014, the co-founder and president of the Good Jobs Institute, Zeynep Ton, wrote a book called The Good Job Strategy, which I have here. It's just blurry, but nice and red. And in that book, she had 4 main case studies. So those case studies were Quick Trip, Costco, Mercadona, and Trader Joe's. She's an operations professor at MIT Sloan. And at the time, she was just looking at companies that were in these low margin, low price industries and realized that some of them were not dealing with super high employee turnover. They were also paying a lot more and they had really happy customers. So Quick Trip is a convenience store gas station chain. Mercadona is the largest retailer supermarket in Spain. I'm sure all of you have been to Costco. There's plenty of Costco's in New Hampshire. And as you can see here, these companies at Quick Trip, their starting pay is about $55,000 an hour, which seems pretty, hard to believe in as a convenience store. They promote 100% of people from within. Costco, their starting pay is $17 an hour, but their average pay is $26 an hour. So that means that there's a lot of built-in pay progression as you get better at the job and as you stay for longer. And all these companies have a significantly lower fraction of turnover compared to their industry. So Quick Trip has about a quarter of their industry in terms of turnover. Costco, 17% overall turnover, 6% turnover for employees who stay after at least 1 year. So very low turnover, people are staying. And it's not just because they're paying them more. All these companies have created a system that enables them to invest a lot more in their people. And they do that through a combination of operational choices that set up their employees for success so they can be more productive, so that they can contribute, so that they can execute and avoid all those mistakes and errors that we talked about earlier. So those 4 operational choices, focus and simplify, standardize and empower, cross-train, and operate with Slack, are we're going to dive in a bit deeper with some examples from lots of different industries. And I encourage you, especially if you're an operator at a business, you're probably going to be thinking about, how you might already be applying some of these choices, some areas of opportunity, and thinking about how they all sort of fit together in a system, because you really can't do one without the rest. So I'm going to start with one of our favorite operational choices, which is focus and simplify. And this operational choice means that these companies know why customers come to them, and they want to be the best at that. And they're also willing to make trade-offs and say, we're not going to be the best at some things. So if you know In-N-Out Burger, they are fantastic at low price, delicious, high quality burgers, but they give up on things. They don't have chicken fingers. They don't have salads. They say, we're going to focus on what we want to deliver to our customers, and we're going to take a lot of other things off of our plate so we can really be the best at that. Costco, they even have this term called intelligent loss of sales, which means in order to give you that fantastic value that you're used to at a Costco store, they are not going to give you a ton of variety. So if you go into a Costco, you see tons of products around you, but it doesn't actually mean that they have a ton of different options. You go into the toothpaste aisle, there's probably 1 or 2 choices. You go into the pharmacy and see Advils, you probably see like 1 or 2 brands. They don't have as many options as a typical retailer, but they're doing that so that they can give you that really great value, so that they can also prevent their staff from having to have as much in their head about all the different complexities of the business. They can really be experts. So these companies have clarity on why customers choose them. And then with that focus in mind, they relentlessly simplify their operations so that their employees can be productive and so that they can drive really great value for their customers. So when I talk about simplification, it's really in these two buckets mainly. So think about how can we reduce some of the extra workload, some of the non-value add work that our teams are doing that doesn't actually add value to our customers. And also, how can we smooth work? How can we think about the timing of work so that employees are able to handle everything that they have on their plate without over exerting their capacity and making sure that they can get all the work done. So, just as a similar example to Costco, Trader Joe's, they have only about 4,000 products in their stores compared to a typical retailer, which has closer to 40,000. And what that means is there's less extra workload where employees would be stocking, they would be handling different deliveries that come at different times. By having that focused offering, they can really think about being experts, and they can also spend a little bit less time doing things that don't matter to the customers. We have Quest Diagnostics up here. Their call center went on a Good Jobs journey. And one of the first changes that they made is they looked at all the different calls that were coming into the call center. And they realized that some of these calls didn't have to happen at all. So they had calls that were call center reps calling just to say, the result was negative, you're totally fine, there's no emergency here. And they're calling doctors' offices who are like, they don't want to receive that call. They would rather it be an email, they'd rather receive it in some other way. So reps are spending their time doing all of these calls that didn't actually matter to their customers and sometimes frustrated their customers. So when they're able to take that workload out, they actually reduced call volume by about 17% without having to make any other changes. So that meant that they had already been spending labor hours on work that didn't matter to their customers. Now their their reps could focus on work that mattered a lot more and spend their time contributing to other parts of their job. And last, when it comes to work smoothing, timing of work is incredibly important, especially if you're in a seasonal business. Sometimes there's a lot of different peaks throughout the week, let alone the year. So we worked with a retailer that they had a lot more traffic on the weekends, which was when a lot more people were coming into the mall to shop for clothes, but they were also getting their biggest delivery on the weekends. So that means they already had a big peak in demand, and they're adding extra workload by having that delivery happen at the same time. So by changing the timing of that delivery, it meant that employees could get through the work, they could unpack the delivery on Thursday, and they could be more present for their customers on the weekend. They could have more face time, they could interact more with customers and get the work done without as many errors. So focus and simplify is an incredibly important choice. When you have that strict understanding of what you want to be the best at, it also enables you to figure out what work to take off your employees' plates so that they can serve your customers better and they can be more productive. And if they're more productive, that also means that they can be paid more. So you'll start to see how a lot of these choices start to connect to investment of people and connect to each other. So focus and simplify, it's where a lot of companies start, but it's not the only choice that matters. When you have less workload, it's also important that that workload is consistent. So a lot of that comes from having really great standards. So standardize and empower is the next operational choice, where these companies, they want to standardize routine work, management practices, things that really are important to have consistency. But they don't want to have a million standards that employees can't possibly know all of, or just create that extra workload by having standards that are out of date. So really important to have great standards. And then you also can't standardize everything, which is why having empowerment, having your employees being able to use their judgment to contribute, to be able to improve work, improve standards, improve the customer experience when there isn't a standard in place, both incredibly important to complement each other. So as an example, Quick Trip, they are that convenience store gas station chain that customers love. They drive out of their way to go to a Quick Trip. They have what's called the daily activity worksheet. And this is a list that every single employee uses. And it's a checklist. So it says, every 30 minutes, you're cleaning the bathroom, you're checking the till, you're stocking the shelves. It's very strict on what you should be doing and when. And it even has a sign off. So you're putting your initial next to it when you complete a task. So they are using this as an active standard so that if the bathroom's not super clean, your manager can say, okay, wasn't that clean? I know who did it. I'm going to give them some constructive feedback so they can improve in the future. And it was actually the employees who helped create this daily activity worksheet. And that was, it was from their experience of what really matters, so that they didn't have too many different tasks that really weren't important to execute in this way. So standards incredibly important just to reduce mental burden. They don't have to think as much about reinventing the wheel every single day of what tasks to do. But they also, when now they have less stress to think about what they're doing, when something does go wrong, when there is an opportunity to make a customer's day better, they also have the bandwidth to be more empowered. So as an example, a lot of hospitality companies have what's called a glitch report, including the Four Seasons, which is when things are going wrong. It's going to be documented. You're going to say, okay, this is what happened. And as a team, they come together and they say, okay, what went wrong? How can we fix it for this customer? And how can we fix it for future customers so that this doesn't happen again? So these employees are improving the work, improving standards, and they're thinking about how do we really improve the customer experience so that we can just have operations go much more smoothly, and improve overall what they're trying to achieve. And at the same time, when you have empowerment, it also improves their jobs. So instead of just following a rigid set of standards, they have more ownership, they have more agency to say, how can we do things better? How can we be engaged in doing something for us, not having these standards be done to us? So with the first two operational choices, we have a better understanding of what work matters. We're starting to standardize some of that work so that it's done consistently. And now it's important to think about who is doing the work and how can we better empower our team to be able to do the work when it needs to get done. So this is where cross-training comes in. Cross-training is a super important operational choice, especially in services where there's a lot of customer-facing work and a lot of non-customer-facing work. And oftentimes those two groups are kept separate from each other. You're specialized in one thing. You don't know how to help your peers. You're not able to, you're not trained on how to move into a different part of the operation. So sometimes you're not busy and sometimes they are busy and you don't actually have the bandwidth or the training to be able to support each other. So cross-training is, finding that balance of flexibility and specialization that enables, employees to adapt to changes in customer traffic and to, stay more productive when there are different times of year and different times of day. So as an example here, Mercadona, that supermarket chain in Spain, they are, they have cashiers and they have cleaners, and they have their cashiers cross-trained to clean and their cleaners cross-trained to cash. So just a little bit of cross-training can go a long way for some of these companies, because it means that when there's a huge line and it's Saturday afternoon and everyone wants their groceries, cleaners can stop cleaning and they can come and open up a register. And that means that they can get through that line a lot faster. And when it's Tuesday afternoon and no one is coming into shop, the cashiers, instead of having nothing to do or being sent home and not getting enough hours, they can still be productive. They can still contribute because they're cross-trained to clean and have something to do that is really useful for the business. So all of this, cross-training, it's not just productivity, it also helps with scheduling and for employees having more opportunity to learn different parts of the business so you can potentially even build your own career and start to have an understanding that allows you to have more oversight and more responsibility. So the last operational choice is operate with slack, which means that these companies are erring on the side of too much staff and see the cost of overstaffing as actually less expensive as the cost of understaffing. So we're saying having a little bit more labor on your P&L, which sounds expensive. And that is why this choice comes last for a reason. So when we talk about the cost of understaffing, going back to the vicious cycle, when you don't have enough people on the floor, this can lead to more errors. This can lead to more issues with consistency. You can have, you're in a restaurant, food quality and food safety concerns, all of these things that can be really expensive. But when you can add more labor, you can start to have, the bandwidth to be able to execute more consistently. But it is last for a reason, because we've already talked about removing some of that non-value add work with Focus and Simplify, having more flexibility with empowerment and cross-training so that when there is slack time, it's used well, having empowerment so that, they're able to take care of the customer, use great customer feedback and great customer experiences. And it's, at Quick Trip, they actually have a role called the reserve workforce. So that is someone whose job is dedicated to, if there's a call out in a store, they actually have a person whose job it is to say, okay, I'm going to be in that store today. So they have this extra labor on their payroll, but they're using it in a way that really helps their stores run more smoothly and to make sure that they're always taking care of the customer. But we say this choice comes last for a reason, because you also can't operate with Slack if you have Slackers, which is why high expectations environment is also a prerequisite for operate with Slack. And we're looking at the system, and before we talk about investment in people, I think it's just important to highlight why these are part of a system and how they come together. So these operational choices, these are the choices that companies are making so that their team can contribute more, so that they can be more productive, so they can spend their time on the things that matter to your customers, and that can enable more people investment. And more people investment enables you to have that really great, stable, motivated team that can deliver that great customer contribution, create that great value for your customers. And they really just come together. So the investment in people part of this, it's not just about paying more, but it's about having, meeting those basic needs is incredibly important so that you can reduce your high turnover. At the same time, investing in excellence, having a really high expectations environment so that your employees can sort of meet your higher standards. So that means really strong training, great hiring, performance management, internal promotion. So you want people who already know your business to have opportunities to progress with you. At Quick Trip, they're such a great example of this. They even say on their job descriptions that we're going to be a lot more challenging than other jobs, but it's reciprocity. This is a job that you're going to work harder, but you're going to be rewarded for it. It's a give and take. We give a lot, and we expect you to do the same. So for them, when they're doing their hiring process, they have a really rigorous hiring process where they are sort of telling you all the things that are hard about the job even before you apply. You have to fill out this survey that says, I'm comfortable being in cold storage. I'm comfortable working alone sometimes. I'm comfortable, being on my feet all day. So they really want to set the expectations, and it's a pretty rigorous process, and they're very selective when it comes to who they're going to take at Quick Trip. Even once you're hired, you go through a 2-week dedicated training program with someone who's been internally promoted to be a trainer, and you're at a training store, and you're spending that 2 weeks really mastering the job. And at the end of the 2 weeks, there is a test. And not everybody even passes that test. So about 80% of folks move on from the training to become a full-time employee at Quick Trip. And that is because they really want to make sure that it's self-selecting. So the people that they're going to take on, they want to make sure that they are going to be prepared for the job, and that they know that they're up to the task. And that's part of why they can have such low turnover, because they really have spent a lot of time making sure that they have the right folks in those positions, and those people want to stay. And last part of investment in people that I'll touch on before handing over to Dewey, but pay investment looks different at different companies, and it doesn't have to happen for all employees at once. So Sam's Club, they've been on a good jobs journey. One of the things that they realized is that they had key roles within their stores that really mattered for their customers. So these are the baker, the butcher, the team leads, especially in fresh, that were incredibly critical to that store performing well. So they started with a big pay investment for those roles. They said, if we can make these roles into destination roles, then maybe we can create a lot more stability so that eventually we can raise everyone else's wages. So they raised those roles from a base 15 by $5 to $7 an hour, which is a pretty significant investment and was really life-changing for those employees. But they were able to create that stability there, which allowed them to later increase pay for everyone else, but starting in a very sort of specific area. And Mud Bay take a different approach. They raise everybody's wages 30%, but they did it over 3 years. They are a pet supply retailer based in the Pacific Northwest, and they really, have really small margins, like I'm sure a lot of your businesses, and they couldn't raise everyone's wages up to a living wage all at once. It took them a while, so they started raising wages every 6 months, and they eventually got to a living wage in 2021. They also increased hours. They said, we want fewer part-timers, we want more full-timers, because we see that the people who are going to stay with us longer are the ones who want to have that full-time role. And then Dewey will be sharing more, but he made a big investment into hourly pay, and at the same time raised expectations. So that meant letting go of some poor performers just by enforcing their attendance policy, making sure that they are going to say, we're giving you more, but like with Quick Trip, we also expect more. And just quickly sharing some of the results that we've seen from the companies I just mentioned. Sam's Club has been on this journey since 2017. They reduced hourly turnover by 25%. They increased their full-timers by 13%. All that stability also helped them drive really great performance improvements. So much higher customer satisfaction, more productive employees. So units per labor hour up 16%, improved same-store sales. And similarly with Mudbay, also reduced turnover, increased their full-timers, increased their same-store sales. They had a more stable team to help them position themselves to be more into services, because they had a team who could actually offer more veterinary advice to help them differentiate from their competitors. And with Moe's, reduced turnover, reduced absenteeism, and as Dewey will share more, but also seeing the lift in sales, in catering, and customer satisfaction. So that's a little bit of the framework itself. What makes this really exciting is that we have someone who has been doing the work at Moe's Original Barbecue in Maine. So I will turn it over to Dewey to share a bit more about what he's been working on over the past few years.
Thanks. Can y'all hear me? Okay. Well, yeah. So my name's Dewey. I live in Maine. We've got a couple of restaurants. We just bought another restaurant a few weeks ago, trying to expand our reach. And what we're trying to do is expand our impact. I think we're kind of onto something with the Good Job strategy. And I was telling a couple of people before the call that I read the book, The Good Job Strategy, which is a great book, a couple of years ago when we were just coming out of COVID. And I really felt like we landed on something when I read it, and I emailed my managers and I said, hey, I think we're onto something. And I didn't really know what to do. And so the book was about Costco and Quick Trip and these other companies and about how great they're doing, but I didn't know what to do myself. So I reached out to the Good Jobs Institute, and really what the Institute seems to do is help companies to kind of because it's one thing for Costco to be doing it, but it's another thing for a restaurant or a big business or small business to turn the Titanic and switch over to that. And I think that is that was the hard part. I didn't even know where to start. So luckily, I sent an email to the Good Jobs Institute, and luckily they almost surprisingly emailed me back and said, oh, that's so cool. We'd love to work with you. So so they did. They came up and did a workshop for both of our restaurants. We closed for a day. And they've been really instrumental with helping me move along on this journey. And so what we did is initially, I realized that the situation for us was broken. I had even kind of lost interest in the restaurant world. I knew I loved hospitality, but it had become really a nightmare kind of managing what seemed to be uninterested employees. We always had a core group, but then we had just a revolving door of people who weren't fit for it, didn't care about it. So that was really the struggle, and it had just beat me down. And so I was ready to try anything. So coming out of COVID, I kind of went all in on some employee wages. I read some things about what a living wage would be in Maine, and kind of picked I did go to business school and got an MBA several years ago. And I just remember these case studies I would do, that I would crunch all the numbers and I'd be completely wrong about what my conclusion was. And I was like, I was never right about, seemed like anything. So here I was crunching all these numbers for if we change the pay structure, what it's going to cost. And I really don't even know if I was right. about all this stuff, but I ended up giving pretty good sized raises across the board, but not everybody got a huge raise because some people were already making pretty good money. So I ran into there. I can kind of tell you it wasn't all a bed of roses. It was like, oh, we gave everybody raises, but then there were certain people that were upset that they'd been there for 5 years and somebody who just started was making $1 an hour less than them, So, and yeah, I had to convince people that we were trying to build a supporting cast along with the veterans, and they all were making more money, but there was just some little unforeseen things that happened as we went through it. But then there were some good things too. I remember I used to walk through the restaurant on a really busy day and think, oh, I hope this person who's been back in a hot kitchen doing prep for 2 days now, getting ready for the weekend, like, oh my God, I hope Craig doesn't quit. And then once I gave the raises, I found myself walking back there and thinking, man, he's really earning his money today. And that was a big mindset shift for me, which made me feel so much better just as an employer to be able to look at my employees and look at them in the face and say, man, I'm paying you guys really well right now. Like, it's an investment. What am I going to get back for that investment? It was just kind of a weird dynamic that I didn't even know would happen like that, but that was great. I'll take you through a little bit of it. Then, it's hard to go into everything, but the initial raises were basically, I gave everybody raises, but we still had the exact same crew that we had the week before when we were paying the old wages. So it definitely highlighted some people that just weren't really on board. And we had a generally decent team, but we really were able to the people that didn't really buy in at that point, you raise your standards just because when you're paying them more, you're like, you expect more. And the people that weren't really on board kind of worked themselves out. So that was some turnover that we faced over the course of the year. And about probably a year into it, we had a kitchen GM-ish kitchen manager person and a front of the house manager. And last October, my front of the house manager took a job with a bank. She was a single mom. She got a better schedule. The kitchen manager, the same week, he and I he just unloaded on me one day, and he was like, I don't know why you're paying all these people so much money. They're not doing anything. Like, he just was not on board. He was very old school. He wanted to get paid $100,000 and have everybody else making 30 because he wanted all that money. So that didn't work. And I saw that coming. We ended up parting ways. So in a week, I had lost my kitchen manager and my front of the house manager. And I was freaking out for about a day. I was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And this is when I knew something had fundamentally changed, because we did not miss a beat. The other staff was like, hey, we'll pick this up. I had 2 people volunteer to run the front of the house. I had another couple of people in the kitchen like, we got this. And we literally didn't miss a beat. We'd done such a good job of hiring and paying people more that it really was seamless. And it was, we were better 2 weeks later than we were the 2 weeks before. Now, the front of the house manager ended up coming back from the bank. So that's the way that story ended. And that was great. But I thought that was really telling. And 2 other things that I would mention are, we ended up paying about $180,000 last year in wages just between our 2 restaurants. And that was $180,000 more than the previous year. So on paper, for 6 months after I gave the wages, and it was during our slow time, it looked like it was going to be financially a disaster. It was really stressful. And in the too much information category, I also got really sick about a month after we gave our wages, and I was like bedridden for about 4 months and basically unable to work. So we'd given all these raises, and then I wasn't even there to implement the whole thing. And what ended up happening, I kept looking at the numbers, and I was a basket case. I was like, I was sick. It looked like we were going to lose a couple $100,000 for the year. And I was I was just like, what have I done type thing. And it was definitely an exercise in faith, because I was like, this is crazy. I was like, I've risked my whole family's life, like everything was just on the line. And then all of a sudden things started to kind of turn around. I remember I looked in June and I was like, golly, we made some money back this month. I was like, holy smokes. And then by July, I was like, geez, we might even break even this year, which I did not care if we broke even at that point. I was like, if we break even, it was worth the risk. And then by the end of the year, we ended up, personally, I made more money than I ever had between those two restaurants, after also paying out that $180,000 more in wages. So it just worked. And it didn't, the sum was much greater than the whole was much greater than the sum of the parts. It just didn't make sense. But what I think I kind of found out was we had a lot of unrealized potential, that we had been playing a lot of prevent defense leading up to that point. I remember, busy weekends would be like, oh God, Saturday's going to really stink. We've got, whatever. We were all freaked out. We were like, oh, should we take anything more on Saturday? No, we're too busy. And once we were paying people more and we had a great staff, and we really tried to be specific about who we hired at that point. We were very particular. We try to hire people who are very high end. Now we always have ads out for managers, because even people that aren't managers, sometimes you'll be hiring a manager, you're like, I can't believe this person applied for this job. They're obviously not a manager, but they just were like, but we've found that we've got a lot of really high-end people that we pay really well, but we don't even call them really managers at work. We call them managers because they manage high-end projects and try to fix things, but they're not covering shifts for people. They're not doing the schedule. They're not really hiring and firing per se. But we've really kind of focused on bringing in very high-end people. And as we all know, this is the part that we all know, but we don't dare to fully staff like this, is that two really good people can do the work of 4 to 5 not great people. And we all know that, but we apply it when we hire managers, but we don't seem to apply it to the rest of the staff. We kind of hire managers at a higher rate, and then we employ their minions at a much lower rate and think that they can be the worker bees. And I think we're kind of just moving away from that. So that was really great. I think so. We've really been particular about who we brought in, and I'll just even take a step back on kind of the good jobs part of it, because I think what gets lost sometimes, even for me, is, and when we're hiring people, we'll talk about the good jobs strategy, but it really is the word good job is the strategy part is kind of the operational side behind the curtain, but the good jobs part is the most important. And what we're trying to do is pay people a living wage. We're trying to give them a situation where, we talked about operating with slack. We're trying to hire high-end people that are cross-trained, so that we have some slack built in, so people aren't being asked to stay late, asked to come in early, asked to come in on their day off. It's like I think what the book did was kind of define what is a good job. And we've kind of taken that and tried to use that definition and apply it to our model. So that's been really, I think, incredibly great, because we feel generally like people are very happy at their jobs. We've also implemented, I think Amanda mentioned, the hotel chain that does kind of reports when they have issues going on. So we've implemented some other things around what we're doing to deal with issues and how we have meetings, and we're very structured on getting employee involvement and continuous improvement and those types of things, because I think that really drives employee satisfaction as well. So every time there's an issue, somebody emails it to me, and the beauty of it, I won't go too deep into that, or if I see something that's wrong, I don't even deal with it in the moment. I save it for our meeting the next week, and we have these meetings that we just talk through the issues, and we're like, okay, this came up. We're not checking to-go items off the tickets as well right now. Like, why is that not happening? Who wants to be in charge of kind of running that and fixing it? So that's an example of the ways that we involve employees in fixing the problems, rather than me driving a fix down their throats that they don't listen to or want to do. So that's been really great. So it's not without its challenges. There are weird challenges that come in from left field. We have so many high-end people right now that I've had 2 people in the last couple of weeks saying, like, kind of like, what more can I do? Like, they've kind of like, okay, they're ready for more. So Jessica, my co-owner, basically, and I are saying, what can we do to, now we're kind of at a point where we're really trying to look at people's skill sets and fit them into exactly the right positions within what we're doing, because we're just busy. And I know there's things that I do that I could probably co-opt people to do at the restaurant that they'd rather be doing. So we're now trying to kind of identify those areas, because we have a lot of great employees. But you do run into a little bit of not overstaffing, but we are fully staffed, and that creates a couple of other issues. We're tips based, so we tip everybody out at the restaurant, and so when we're really overstaffed, people don't love that. So it's kind of, we deal with some issues that are very easy to work through, because the other thing is, you think you're overstaffed for a week, and then next week 2 people call out, one's on vacation, and you're perfectly staffed. So we're really, I think, rather than feeling like you're perfectly staffed, but then 80% of the weeks you're not, we're kind of staffed well 80% of the weeks, and then 20% we're overstaffed. And so it's kind of flipped the script on that a little bit. Another thing that's a little bit hard for us in Maine is we're open year round, but we're definitely seasonal. So we carry a lot of payroll in the slower months. And so we really try to blow it out in the summer months. We do tons of caterings, and we were talking a little bit before about how October is kind of our last hurrah, grand finale of the year, and we're busy right up through end of October. But then things do slow down a little bit. And so from November, December, January, February, March, April, it's pretty big losses some months, and that's very scary. So it's not without some pitfalls when you're seasonal and you're carrying, we want to give people their hours, and we're not trying, we're very focused on letting people live outside of work and being able to afford to live. But when you're paying them year round, and we do it very intentionally, it's hard and it's stressful sometimes. And even I shoulder, I guess at some point, maybe I'll be so rich that we just have a year or two's worth of income in the bank account, and I don't have to think about it. But it's pretty stressful, even leading up into our busy months, which, like, okay, how busy are we? Are we on track for last year? Am I going to have a good year again? Oh, this month was a little slower. What's wrong? You kind of, there's some stress that's kind of involved in that. But even this year, it's kind of turning out really well. I don't think we'll have the same year that we did last year, but I still am having a very good year. And at our meeting last year in January, I gave everybody basically another dollar raise. And I said, I was pretty straight up, and I was like, I'm not doing this because you're doing such a great job. I'm doing this because I expect you to do a great job, and I expect you to blow it out this next year. And this is what I'm expecting. And so on and so forth, certainly with the intent that it's an investment. So that's been, I think, really a great part of it, is that I've kind of shifted that mindset. I don't look at wages as a expense so much. I look at it as an investment. And it's really about how much more business can we do that we weren't doing before. And I think it's amazing how much sometimes, when you're looking at when the government talks about taxation and all this stuff that you hear about on TV, and our deficit and all that stuff, I'm always amazed at how much money, like when the economy is doing well, how much tax revenue it seems to bring in and seems to offset all that stuff. You're like, wow, yeah, having a really good year can really offset your costs. You know, you're obviously every bit of the part of your business that you do is based on a model where your revenues far offset your costs. And so it's just a matter of, if you can do a lot more in revenue, like you can take on more, you know, if you staffed up a little bit, you could crush it. It's amazing what that extra little bit, you know, we paid $180,000 more in wages, but we blew it out in catering last year. So that it's amazing what blowing it out, I think, can do. And then just one other, you know, more of a personal story, but I had an employee in Bangor pull me aside last year and just say, you know, Dewey, I just want to thank you because this is the first year I didn't have to go to Goodwill to buy my kids back to school clothes. So it was like all this stuff that I'm doing on the back end and all the stuff that, you know, with good jobs and everything, it was like, that was the most tangible thing that almost happened all year, is like somebody just coming up and saying that. And so I think it's definitely a lot of work. We're trying to cross-train people. Like, you can't just do it. It takes a lot of time. We're a small business. I don't have a cross-training crew. I don't have an HR department. But we do have people within the team that are working on training and cross-training and that sort of thing. So that's just all stuff that's kind of a work in progress. So we're two years in, but it really wasn't long before I realized some really great benefits from it. So I think that's kind of the takeaway. It's like, we're constantly now really trying to refine what we're doing, but we saw some really great benefits at the beginning, but it's also scary. And it's scary to give wages a big increase like that when you don't know that the money's coming in. I get that. So it's been hard. We're part of a small franchise, and I can't really get the rest of my franchise owners to get on board yet, only because it's so risky, and they're all just like me. They're just family, you know, they have small families and they are not crushing it. And so it is kind of scary, but I think it can pay off, and it can bring the joy of whatever your particular industry is back to where and we're all, if you're in business, you're really focused on, you're an entrepreneur at heart to some degree. And when you're an entrepreneur and you're working on dialing back the business, it never feels right. And so for me, it kind of brought back to, okay, how can we grow it? How can we market it? How can we push the boundaries and become busier? And that's the fun part. So, so anyway, that's kind of, you know, I can kind of wrap it up. I know that we don't have a whole lot of time left, but, and I'm worried that my little, internet thing's going to cut out at any time, but I don't
want to
think
give them a chance to ask you some questions. If anyone wants to come on camera or come off mute and ask some questions, you are welcome to. And Amanda, if you can explain how they can get in touch with you as the Good Job Institute. And am I correct, because you said small companies have a different fee base with the Good Jobs Institute? You're a nonprofit, right?
Yes. So yeah, invite any questions in the last few minutes for Dewey, either type them in the chat, or once I give a quick explanation, would invite you to come on camera. But yeah, so we're a nonprofit. We're based here in Cambridge, and we work directly with companies. So our primary work is partnerships with companies in service sector, manufacturing, in companies that basically have operationally intensive industries with large frontline workforce base. And we help them to generate urgency and alignment around this work, and then to map out what are the different changes that are going to help drive whatever it is that you define as your customer value aspirations. So if you'd like to get in touch with us, I put my email. If you would like the book, I'll add it again. We work with large companies, small businesses as well. And we'd be happy to share more. And like Zena mentioned, for small businesses, we try to do as much as we can for low fees. And just as part of our mission to create more good jobs.
Yeah, I know we have retail and manufacturing on the call right now, and
Yep.
and hospitality. So
Glad to see.
if you have any questions, do you think, I know you mentioned that it changed the, it did change the turnover and the performance, and do you think it changed the mental wellness of your employees and the feeling of purposefulness in the job, or did it change the culture? Basically, did it change the employees' satisfaction?
Yeah, for sure. I think, one of the cool things is
I think we're losing.
um, I kind of view this as kind of, oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, now. Yeah.
Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. I switched over to my phone internet, and I hope this is working. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And if you can't, just hold up your hand or something.
No, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. But I think we kind of view it now as kind of like, what is our why, a little bit, like, why are we doing this? Yeah, we have a restaurant, but why are we really doing this? And it's really to kind of spread around these. It's become a little bit more for us, like kind of a moral imperative, a little bit. And with that, it's been cool to bring employees along with that. Like, here's what we're doing, big picture.
We're losing a
So
little bit of your audio
I
quality.
felt very I mean, oh,
That's
all
okay.
right, hold on. I'm gonna try some. You can, I'll be back in 2 seconds, but
So
I'm sorry about
I'll share some upcoming opportunities for you. If you could share the screen, Michelle, for people who are still online. I just wanted to mention that we have actually the moderator for our next webinar on with us. Alan Reitz is bringing on Clay Adams, the CEO of Mascoma Bank, and Deb Flannery, and they're going to be talking about how they designed with 8 major Upper Valley employers the Upper Valley Loan Fund. So a model for affordable housing in the region to provide loans for affordable apartments targeted to moderate incomes. That is happening in the Pathways to Prosperity on November 15th. You can already register for that one. And in October, we have coming up part of our Bear in Mind, navigating a multi-generational workplace. This is one of the discussions where we have people from different generations, and they're going to be discussing their style of communication, understanding their preferences, how they come to work, and what they look for in work, and how they communicate across generations. We also have our event coming up. Next slide. Oh, that's it. Okay. We have the Sustainability Slam coming up on November 2nd, and that is a time when we share a lot of stories like Dewey's. And it's a place where you can come and learn from different organizations, and it's just one initiative that you've done that has improved your workplace, community, or the environment. And it's a fun event to come and network at. So we encourage you to come to that as well. And I'll go back to Dewey, give him a chance to wrap it up and answer the culture change.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, I think just we have very little turnover right now. That's been the best part. So culturally, people are happy at work. But it's not a bed of roses. You still have your same little issues, employee issues, little things, but they're almost minor and fixable now. So that's been the best part. I think, we definitely have higher standards, but it's not like they don't drop below the standard every now and then. But it's just with everybody else being at that higher level, it's easy to kind of bring people up or not. And I there's a great book called Unreasonable Hospitality, and that I finished reading a few weeks ago. But there was one little line in it where he said there's two types of employees: the ones that are trying and the ones that aren't. And what we found is we have a lot of employees who are trying, and if they're trying and we have our standards and we're paying them well, then we usually can kind of pick them up and help them along to get to where they need to be. So all of that has worked really well. The culture is great. And yeah, I think that's definitely one of the side effects of what happens is the culture has become really incredibly positive.
That's great. I want to thank both Dewey and Amanda, and I will follow up. We're all registrants with a recording and with a link to the slides and Amanda's email so that you can access the resources at the Good Jobs Institute or the book if you want one. And I know we had said an hour and a half, but I want to give Dewey his time back. If you're wondering, he's in a catering truck. So we'll let him go back to the job. And I want to thank you both so much and thank the audience for attending. And we hope to see you in other events for NHBSR.
Great. Thank you. And
Thank you.
anybody who wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to discuss it. And, you know, I definitely am an advocate, but I also could tell you the good, the bad, the ugly, and all the things that we've faced with it. And I'm more than happy to share all that. So thank you.